So hello guys, welcome to the video. So in this video we will solve the question set matrix zeros. Alright, so firstly I will explain you the question and then we will try to solve it. So the question is, in this question we are given three inputs. One is row, second is column, and third is the array elements. Alright, so the row and column is the input from the user and we will create a array, 2D array of the size of that row and column. Alright, then we are inputted with all the elements of the array. That means if I fill this array, let me take this 1, 2, 3, 8, 7, 5, 4, 2, 1. Let's take it 0. Let's take it 5, 8, 6, 7, 8. Let's take 0, 3, 1, 2, 5, 4. Alright, so this is a random array. And what we have to do in this, that the places where 0 occurs, that means this. Alright, so where 0 occurs, we have to replace all the elements of that column into zeros and all the elements of that row into zeros. In which row 0 will occur, that row will fully become 0. And the row or the column or at the index at which 0 will occur, that indexes column and row both will become zeros. Alright, that means this whole row will become 0, this whole row will become 0, and this, and here is another 0 here. So we will create this row, this column is also as 0 and this row is also as 0. Alright, so I hope you understood what I am trying to say. So if you understood this, then we will try to approach the solution. So how we will solve this out? Can I create something? If I take a copy of this array of size row and column and then traverse into the array and see where 0 occurs. If somewhere 0 occurs, I will convert that whole row into 0 and convert that whole column into 0. Alright, I will try further. Then I will go at this element and then I will convert this whole column into 0 and this whole row into 0, and other elements will be as it is there, 5, 6, 8. Alright, so these elements will remain same as before, but all the elements which occurred in the same row of that zeroth element, and all the elements of that all the elements which occurred in the same column inside this which 0 occurred, so that all elements will become 0. Alright, so what can I do? I will traverse whole array and then I will place 0 in front of every element where in which row a single 0 occurs. But there is a problem in this, that if I create another array of the same size, it will increase my space complexity. Alright, and it will consume some space, and this will be not a optimized solution for this question. Alright, so we will not use this method to solve this out. So now another method. Can we create a more optimized approach for this? Yes, we can create a more optimized approach. Can I create a single array of size columns and a single 1D array of size row, just for marking that in which row 0 has occurred or in which column 0 has occurred? So this array will take care of all the rows in which 0 occurred, and this array will take care of all the columns. So if there is a 0 in this row, I will tick mark here, but there is no 0 in this row, so I will not tick mark. There is a 0 in this row, so I will give a tick mark here. Alright, or I will mark this array index. Alright, if I will mark this array index, then at last what I will do, the indexes which are marked in my row array or column array, I will create that indexes rows and columns as 0. Alright, so I'll traverse further, then I'll get here another 0, so I will mark this index. Then I'll see that in this column there is 0 and in this column there is 0. So what will I do now? I will create another array and no, I will not create another array. I will just modify this array by seeing this marked array indexes. Alright, so I will go at every index and see if it is marked or not, and if it is marked, so I will create that whole row into a 0 row. Alright, or I will convert that whole row into 0. Alright, and whole column also in 0. Alright, so it is same, but here is also one problem, that this array will also generate a space inside our memory, and this array will also generate our space, although it's smaller than the size we used before, but it will also take a space of column, and it will also space the number of also take space of the number of rows. Alright, so this is also not an optimized approach because it will take extra space. Can I not create a solution in which I have to take 0 extra space and I will solve my same question? Alright, so yeah, we can do that, but for that we will use this approach only, but this approach in a different manner. Same approach but in a different manner. Earlier we were creating a 1D array here, a 1D array here and here. Alright, so now what we have to do, we will not create this 1D array. We will just assume that we have created this 1D array inside this array only. Alright, so the 1D array which we created for rows is the first column of this array. Alright, so I hope you understood it. Now the 1D array which we created for the columns array is created inside the first row of this array. So I will mark this row and mark this column. Alright, so there will be some steps for this arrays to solve this array. So the first step is, we will first check in this row and this column. Alright, so first let me write check only. Check first row and first column, that is there a 0 or not. Alright, so we'll check that in first row or in first column, is there a single 0 exist? Is there a 0 existing? So no, there is no 0 existing, but this is a step, so we have to pursue it. Now the another step, actually the first step is to check in the first row, and the second step is to let me cut this out and join this here. Alright, so the first step is this, and the second step actually is for column. So I will just copy this. Alright, second step, we have to just delete this row and write column instead. Alright, so this is the second step, this is the first step, this is the second step. So what we will do after completing these two steps, first I will create this shorter. Now I will go towards my third step, and my third step is, now this array is traversed, sorry, this row is traversed, this column is traversed, so we are left with only this part of the array. Alright, so now what we have to do, we have to traverse this part of this array. Alright, so now I'll go and traverse the remaining part of the array. So the remaining part of the array is traverse the remaining part of the array. Check, and when we traverse it, we have to check that if there is 0 or not. Alright, so we have to go and check, traverse first, and we'll check that if there is 0 or not. Alright, now if 0 is found, what we will do? If 0 is found, then we will mark at that column and that row. Then if 0 is found, mark that column and row in first row and column. Alright, so if I found 0 here, so I will go delete this element and delete this element and fill 0 and 0 here. Alright, so this is how I will pursue it. Alright, so this is our third step. After we have done with this step, so now we have to fill the array with the zeros. Alright, so the fourth step is fill the array with zeros. Alright, so these are some steps, and yeah, after this I have also a fifth step for this question. And the fifth step will be I have to check my first row and first column if there a 0 exists. Alright, and if it exists, so what we have to do? We have to create that row and that column also as 0. So if you not have understood what we have done here, so I will explain you it again. Let me first create it shorter again. Alright, so here are some 5 steps so that we will follow. So what are we doing? Firstly, check first row if there is 0 or not. Alright, so we will check in this row there is 0 or not, so there is no 0. Alright, now I will check in the first column that there is 0 or not, so I will check in this first column that there is 0 or not, so there are no zeros. Then I have to traverse the remaining part of the array, check that if there is array, check that if there is 0 or not. Alright, so I will traverse this part of the array and check that if there is 0 or not, and yes, we have found 0 here. So if 0 is found, mark that column and row in first row and column. Alright, so what I will do, I found 0 here. Let me mark this by yellow. I found 0 here. So what I will do, I will go and mark this in this same row and this same column. So I'll write 0 here and 0 here. Alright, now I'll traverse the remaining array. Again I will get a 0 here. So what I will do, I will mark this row and mark this column out. So I'll write 0 and 0 here. Alright, then at the last second last step, fill the array with zeros. Alright, so how we will fill the arrays with zeros? So I will go and check that in which rows there are zeros. Alright, so firstly I will check that in the first column at what indexes there are kept zeros. So 0 is kept here, 0 is kept here. So what I will do, I will place zeros in this full row. I will place zeros in this full row if there is kept 0 in our first column. Then I will go further and I will again see that there is another 0. So what I will do, I will place 0 here, 0 here, 0 here, 0 here. Alright, now I will check in the first row. So I will see that there is 1 0 kept here. So I will convert it in 0. Now I will see that there is 1 0 again kept in the first row. So I will convert this whole column into 0. Alright, now the last step, check my first row and first column if there are 0 exist. Alright, so what we did actually, when we checked this and this condition, we stored values inside a boolean variable. So what we did, that if there were zeros in our first row and zeros in our first column, so we took their values inside a boolean variable, and we will see that if there is a 0, if that boolean variable is true here, so we will convert that whole row or whole column inside in a 0. Alright, so this is what happening here. So if you are some little bit confused, so please stay with me. I will write the code, and with the code you will be betterly understand this question. Alright, so I will jump on the question and I will try to solve it on our Nados website. So what I will do now, firstly I have to take row and column of this matrix. So I'll write matrix dot size and matrix 0 dot size for columns. Now I will create that boolean variable which I told you. So I'll write its name as row check and column check. So I will firstly initialize it with false only, and I'll write column check. Alright, so these are that two variables. Now what will I do? The first step was to check the first row, that if there is a 0 or not, or first we have to check the first column that there is 0 or not. So firstly I will run the loop from I till n, I plus plus. Now what we will do, I'll check that if in matrix, if I will keep my row stable and if I will keep my column stable and row as it is. So if I get a 0 there, then create my column check into true, convert my column check into true. Alright, so here what are we doing? Checking our first column. Alright, so now I will copy this code and paste it down here, and I'll write, now what I will do, I will check my first row. So I'll run this loop till m, and in this I will write 0 at row and column will change now. Alright, and if it is 0, then I will mark as row check as true. Alright, so these two steps are done. Now the third step, traverse the remaining part of the array, check that if there is 0 or not. Alright, so now traverse the remaining array. So what I will do, I will go and run a loop from I1 till IN. I is incremented every time. Then after this I will write J1 till Jm. J is incremented, and inside this what I will do, I'll write my if condition, and inside this condition I'll write that if my matrix is I and J, that means if the element is 0, if any element is 0, I have to write double equals to, if any element is 0 inside this matrix, the remaining matrix, what I will do, I will mark at the first row of that matrix. So I'll mark 0 at the first row of that matrix and at the first column of that matrix. Alright, so this is done. I will write after traversing, check if there is 0 or not. Alright, so this loop is done. After this, we have to fill the array with zeros. Alright, so now fill the array with zeros where expected. So I'll run a for loop from I is equals to 1 till in. I incremented. Inside this I will check a if condition that if matrix is I j 0, for loop is running from j0 till m j++. Inside this, if matrix ij is 0, alright, sorry, by mistake I have written ij. If I 0, that means I am checking, fill the array with zeros by checking in first column. Alright, so we are firstly checking inside first column, and if I get a 0 in my first column, at that row I will mark 0 in whole row. Alright, this is done. Same for the row part. Fill the array by checking first column, and just I will change the loop here. Let me cut this loop from here, and this loop will be alright. Now what will I do? I'll start this j from 1 till m and write 0 j here. After this I'll start this I from 0 to n, and inside this I will write 0 comma j, and that means I will go and check in my first row if there is a 0 in my first row. So I'll mark that whole column as 0. Alright, so the column is same, the row is same, but I will mark that whole column. Alright, now what will I do? This loop is ended here. Now the last step, I have to check that my first row and first column if there is a 0 existing or not. Check in first row if there was a 0 or not. Alright, so I'll write a if condition. Inside this I'll write my row check, and if my row check is true, that means there was a 0. So if there was a 0, so I have to mark that whole column as 0. So I'll run this loop from j to m, j++. Inside this I'll write matrix 0 comma j as 0, and check in the first column if there was a 0 or not. So I'll write a else condition. Let's create a if condition only, and inside this if condition I'll write column check if my column check was 0. So I'll write I from 0 to n and matrix I comma 0. Alright, so these two conditions are completed, and this was the last step of our one of our 5 steps. Alright, so this will convert our matrix into this type of matrix. Alright, and we will get our correct answer, and we will print that correct answer here. So I will run this code and see if it gives some error. Alright, so it is successfully compiled. So now we will submit this code and see how many test cases are passed. Alright, so some test cases are failed. So let me check the code correctly first. So we'll start checking from downwards direction. We are checking in this first row if there was a 0 or not. Alright, so if row check is true, yes. Alright, so we marked 0. If column check is true, so we will mark at 0 in this column. Alright, so this is correct. Fill the array with zeros by checking in first row. Alright, so we will start checking from first row, and if matrix 0j is 0, alright, that means if there is a 0 in my row, so I will make that whole row as 0. So 0 and j. Alright, so yeah, here I have to write I, because I will create all the elements as 0. Alright, yeah, so all the test cases are passed. So I hope you understood this question now. If you didn't understood, I will request you to please go in reverse and see the video again. And I have written all the comments about every for loop, so it will make easier for you to understand. And I hope you understood this video, and I hope you liked the video also. And if you liked the video, do share it with your friends and like the video and subscribe our YouTube channel, and we will meet in the next video. So till then, thank you so much.